Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all. Peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I'm going to give a shout out to Igor Canga. He's left many comments, but I've noticed something in the comments. And that is that English is it's a language he had to study. He may have grown up exposed to English. I'm not sure how many how many English speakers live in his particular city, but the primary language where he grew up is Portuguese, and then next are the languages that the people always spoke before the Portuguese arrived and colonized. And with that being said, I would have to state that when he writes in English, and it's good. Very few misspellings. I mean, very few. When he has errors, you would understand why. If you teach English as a second language, you would know why there are these errors. And I don't see that many of them. I remember seeing two, but I can't remember what they were, but they were minuscule. And I can tell from experience it had more to do with the keyboard than with his knowledge of how to spell in English. He went through the effort. Now, maybe he was given extra tuition in English and his parents paid for it, maybe not, whatever the case was. He still had to do the work to learn the language himself. So if mom and dad pay for you to learn another language and you can speak that language later, well then guess what? You still did your part to learn it. I have had a scenario where I've had students here in Saudi whose parents paid for them to be exposed to English at young ages, and they were. And then others had their parents pay for them to go to good international schools, but they still didn't learn correctly. And they would just give up when it was time to really use your brain. Then that's where they would shut off and just say, you know what I meant, because they're niggas. And I had explained to some of my students that the N-word does not mean black. It actually means that you are lazy and corrupt. And worse than that, you're an N-word with a capital N when you expect and demand the results of not being lazy. You demand and expect the results of being industrious and thorough while being lazy and corrupt. That's what makes you an N-word with a capital N. And when you're willing to fight somebody to get the results you refused to earn and deserve, then you become subhuman. Now, I said that because they all know somebody, at least, that is willing to take it to the level of violence to get a mark or a grade that they did not earn in school. All of them. There have been students in some of these villages, and the students will pull a knife on the professor and say, you're going to give me full mark. And the professor doesn't even know what the student's trying to get out of them because they can't say it in English. And the professors are generally not hired if they speak English that well. A few will be. But universities generally have a quota. A certain number of teachers who learn English as a second language, and a certain number or percentage of teachers for whom English is their first language. They try to get a mix of both. And they'll sit up and they'll say this to both. But, a lot of the teachers who learned English as a second language did not necessarily learn Arabic as their first, let alone the local slang. Igor Canga has shown that literacy in another language is not impossible. So when he writes better in English than people who are born and grew up in English-speaking environments, and you want to say, stop nitpicking, black mind, my response to you is this middle finger. That's the Malcolm X standard. What I ask from you is the Malcolm X standard in your own first language. If it is English, it's English. If it's French, it's French. If it's Swahili, then it's Swahili. I merely ask you for that. I ask black men for that. And for the most part, everyone that bucks against it, that's black at least, is an English speaker. Now, I found that black Arabs generally do preserve the language pretty well. They don't expect to be able. And I know this from B Deep and from Mr. Hausawi. Shouts out to the brother. Assalamu alaikum. Danawa yakake. I've learned this from him. See, there are some words that I will know have a feminine ending, and he will write them and he will spell them with the proper ending letter that has 2 dots at the top. He'll do that. You know what a non-black Arab will do when they write a word with a feminine ending? You know, nouns are masculine and feminine in Arabic, just like they are in Spanish. And in Spanish, many of the nouns with a feminine ending end in the letter A, and the sound that corresponds to that. But see, in Arabic, it's a similar sound, but it has 2 dots on the top of it. And you know what? They'll leave the dots off. You know what that meant, brother? No. Go back there and put them dots on there. You know I'm not Arab. What if I didn't know any better and I turned around and repeated it? And then one day I'm writing something to somebody and I don't put the 2 dots on there, which actually makes it a male possessive, meaning belonging to him. Or at the end of a verb, done to him. Changes the meaning. And then I teach this to somebody else because you taught me wrong. No, you go back and fix it. I have to act like this with them. So I don't think I'm only jumping down the throats of my black brothers because we're easy to beat up on. That ain't why. No. I'm jumping down anybody's throat that does this in their first language. If this is not a military fight in which we are involved, this gender war, and it appears to not be, fine, it's not. So this is what that means then. Since that's not what this is, then that means that this is going to be fought with the pen and with ink. And if it is, then in somebody else's language that you are still learning, you don't use that as a weapon, you're just learning the language. But in your own first language, you're using that as a weapon and as a shield, and you need to know how to do it correctly according to its own rules. We don't sit up here and argue about the weapon that's an enemy designed. If we get a hold of the enemy's weapons, we don't argue about how they designed them, and we shouldn't care about how to properly use them because those are their weapons. You don't properly use them, those weapons will still serve them in your own hands after you intercepted them. It is the same thing here. If you want to fight this war, because it is still going on in certain parts of the world, and you know what? This is actually going to become relevant in the next minute as I'm talking, because it's something I've learned more from Igor Canga. I've learned more about something I'm going to mention next. You see, if you want to sit up and say, well, that's a white man's language and who cares? Okay, Father Mucker, here's what you do then. Take your ass over to somebody who speaks Swahili fluently, or Lingala, or Hausa for the western coast of Africa. Or maybe isiZulu for the southern part of Africa, even though that's not everyone that speaks it. Maybe Venda. I don't know. Pick one. Pick a language spoken in a part of the continent in which feminism is making advancements. Do that. Learn that language, spoken and written correctly, and then use that as a weapon to go against the feminism and the misandry that comes with it before they become the perfect cover for the alphabet agenda that the continent as a whole is rightly rejecting. Even the North. Even the North is with us in that. And I tip my hat to them when it comes to that. You reject that business, good, excellent. Now reject the feminism and the misandry that comes with it too, so that you can properly reject the alphabet agenda. Most alphabet preferring people don't actually push their agenda, and I don't agree with their lifestyle. I'm just saying that's not one of the things for which they're guilty. Got politicians pushing this stuff, and they're serving the interest, and they're serving the interest of not even that population, but rather some elites. But on the continent, you do have feminism and misandry being spread, and it is being spread fairly easily. And as I have stated before, it varies from place to place, but I'm still learning about which place is which way. And Igor Canga has been pretty educational and helpful in me understanding what's going on in Luanda. I don't know about the rest of Angola, but that's its capital city. So it's going to spread from there because it's not only the biggest city, it is also the capital city. It's both. It's not always the case for every country or state, but this is one situation in which, yeah, it is. Maybe I'm wrong about it being the biggest city, but if it's the second biggest city, then guess what? Guess what's about to shape out? That, what I just said. And I think you guys need to understand, maybe you can learn one of those languages if you don't want to fight this war properly in a European language. You think it's too much to learn it properly. And I understand English is difficult. It's not spelled the way it's spoken a lot of times. That does make it strange. But for you, it's easy if you started at a young age. But if you can't be bothered with that because it means using your brain, then go pick Swahili. Kiswahili is written phonetically. isiZulu, same thing. Hell, for the most part, Portuguese is. So is Spanish. Go pick one of those languages. Lingala, same thing. Go pick Somali if that's the case. Learn one of those languages, spoken and written properly, and then turn around and fight it in one of those languages. And stop making excuses because you don't want to become literate. I see that same culture over here. Where I teach is like a Morehouse of Saudi Arabia right now at this point. And I've had to tell my students, stop with that attitude. Stop with the N-word culture or the local version of the N-word culture, the culture of ignorance, where you brag about stupid stuff and laugh about what you don't know. You thought it was just black folks? No. I can't forget about this affecting us because I can't stop seeing it over here with another group of people. You all want to sit up and say all kinds of stuff about, you really bashing the brothers black mind, and why you call yourself black mind, but you bashing. I'm not bashing us for fun. I'm doing it because I see an actual bad happen, and these folks are dependent upon foreigners to run their ship. That's why. Now it works out for me in terms of job, and I'm willing to do them right and not do them wrong and oppress them. But there are other foreigners who come in here and they've got the skills, and these folks have to sit up here and tolerate some of the foul, wrong opinions and immoral opinions of foreigners because they're skilled and the country needs them. You thought it was just black folk being downtrodden? Oh no, not only is it the Arab, it is the Saudi Arabian Gulf Arab that at times has to sit there and take crap off of some Dutch boer from South Africa who's a racist. Or a right wing, an alt-right wing conservative American that's a racist, or a Britisher. Look at them, they're savages. And just losing, not even having basic respect for them. I actually will sit up and say, look, I understand. When I see my students, I'll say, listen, I understand you're going to have mistakes in English. It's okay to have them, just be willing to correct them when I teach you the correction. We'll practice that. That's what makes the difference. These other guys are like, man, did you hear how he was talking? Bruh, shut up. You're an English teacher. It's not your job to make jokes about him. It's your job to help him out if you can. If you can't, then don't. But don't say nothing. He's a student. He's supposed to still be learning. You gonna help him or not? That's my stance with them. But they do that. I mean, they're looking like, oh my God. You know the really dark skin one. Is he part black? Anyway, yeah, his English is really bad. Like, I wonder about his IQ. Like, is he normal? And you have problems with people with low IQ, but it's not evident just because they don't speak English very well. It may be evidence of them being stubborn. It could be, because English is compulsory from a young age and it's free. But I mean, the way these guys talk is different. And sometimes the more educated Arabs and the better bilingual Arabs can pick up on the stuff these white folks say, but they can't get them put out. Can't do it. These guys do not respect the culture because it's Arab. The fact that it's Muslim makes a big difference too, but if they weren't Muslim, these white folks still wouldn't respect their culture. The whole bias, and I've had to tell Arabs this, I had to tell them, look, when we talk about somebody being racist and they came to this country because the job offered them good money, understand this. I'm using the term biased because that's actually the proper translation. There's not one word for racism. Ansuria literally means bias. Nitpicking to a certain extent. It means that. It doesn't specify by itself racial or class bias or gender bias. You have to add ala hisab, and then that means on the account of, and then put the noun afterwards. So, Ansuria ala hisab al-irq. Al-irq, that is the race. So that means that they're biased on the account of race. Racist. Ala hisab al-amwal. On the account of wealth. Classist. Ala hisab al-jins. On the account of gender. You get it? Sexist. That's how. Ala hisab al-jinsiyya. On the account of nationality. Nationalist. That's, you could say ala hisab al-adeen. On the account of religion. That means they are biased on the account of religion, religiously biased. Different translations. And these guys that do know what they're hearing have to sit there and take it, because the system is not ready to start picking up every single Westerner that has a racial bias. But there are times when they come to me and they're like, can you teach them about Islam? And I say no. Because they're not biased only because you're a Muslim. You think it's only a religious bias? The religious bias they have comes out of a racial bias. They were able to successfully take Christianity from black Middle Easterners and turn it into something white and European. That's why I don't have a bias against Christianity. They made it their religion. They can't do that with yours, so they mad. So no, if I told them about it, they already read about it. The fact that in our religion, you and I are equal is the reason why they can't stand that. You see yourself as equal to them, and I know I'm equal to you and them, even if you forget. They know about that, and that's where their problem comes in. No, teaching them about Islam ain't gonna make the racism go away. We done already had that mistake happen. You up here trying to be nice and tell me to go and convince the man. No, stand up to him and call him, call him an inbred cracker, hillbilly or something like that. Go ahead and do that. He'll have more respect for you. And you can even tell him, I know that was harsh what I just said. I wouldn't have said it if you had been more respectful. The minute you become more respectful, I won't have to say stuff like this anymore. Now, what's it gonna be? You got to say stuff like this to them. I have to tell sometimes the educated Arabs, they don't come to me and ask me how to stand up to them. You heard him say this. He wouldn't say this in front of me. He'd probably lie about it. Or he'd get a bunch of his boys around and they'd be like, yeah, I said it. That's how they operate. Record him if he says it. Get him kicked out the country. And that won't work. Oh, well, then that means that your people failed you. And see, everything I'm telling you, you think happened only to us. You think, oh, the Chinese don't have to eat crap. No, they do. There are times they do. You think no other group of people on the planet with melanin has to eat the same amount of crap off white folk we do? No, we actually are more likely to fight them back in some cases. Other cases, they are. Depends on what you got. If they have a government that's willing to deport them with the right amount of evidence, they'll get the evidence. If they got a government that's not, then they won't. They'll do some other stuff. They may shun them. That's part of the reason why here in Saudi you got to have a bubble for the Westerners. One, there are things that people here do that are backwards in the name of culture. And there are times the Westerners who are not biased ain't gonna go for it because they backwards. And the Westerner is right and the local is wrong. And then there's the flip side. But ain't neither one gonna sit up and listen to the other one about what you need to do that's better, because we can each see where the other one's wrong. So there has to be this bubble. I've had Saudis ask me about that before. Why don't Westerners socialize more with Saudis in their free time? And I'm like, bruh, one reason, that you got different reasons for different ones, but there's one thing that's gonna always come up. You all are supposed to pray Fajr in the morning, by definition, before the sun comes up. But you won't go to bed early, and you won't let each other go to bed early. You won't allow people to do it. If I hang out with you all, what time of day are y'all trying to hang out? After Isha? Well, screw you, because that's the last prayer in the day. That's the one about 90 minutes after the sun goes down. And they're going to stay up all night. They'll do it on a work night. Why you think they don't work that hard here? They don't have the energy for it. They're always sleep deprived because their culture won't let them sleep enough. The culture won't. I mean, it's bad. You know, when phones don't ring, phones stop ringing in the morning because people are either trying to sleep at work or they're sleeping at home. Should have slept in the night. Oh yeah, when these cats do get a job, if they can sleep at work, they're going to do it. Show up late, leave early. They say dumb stuff like, well, you know, just set your alarm. Screw your alarm. You're sleep deprived, but I'm not allowed to be. I have to be sharp and alert to teach in the morning. And a lot of us foreigners do. That's how we keep this country running. Now, getting back to the Malcolm X standard, if you would actually start paying attention to more education and academia the way that even BGS does, and we don't know what his education is. He doesn't tell us. And he doesn't have to. But the way that Dr. T.S. Johnson and Green Gorilla do, you may not be all into academia, but if you at least try to learn from them what they're telling you about academia, and you take the same approach to other things, learn, then react. When you double check, learn, confirm, then react. If you could take that sort of standard, you wouldn't believe everything everyone tells you. You would not balk and interrupt everybody every time they start to give you some nuance that you didn't know before. See, what I just told you does not exonerate Arabs of every bad thing they've ever done. It doesn't blame them for something they didn't do either. That's a nuance. That's fair. Some of you say, man, this talk is boring because of that. That's all you need. Many of us still have the same thing they got here. They call it the culture of Jahala. That's the name for it. I had to find this out last week. The culture of Jahala, which just is another way of saying ignorance. The noun. I didn't know. I thought Jahiliyyah was the ignorance, was the noun, but there's another noun for it, Jahala. I don't know what the differences between these nouns are. I'm not an Arab. What I do understand is they have a name for it, and we are giving in the process right now. We are in the process of giving different names to our own culture of Jahala. Ignorance is one of mine. Stereotypicality. Believing in the stereotypes. We got different ways to describe it. They have the same thing here. And guess what? You didn't know. Took me to tell you. You think I'm the first African American to come over here and live in one of their countries and work? No, I'm not the first, and I'm not going to be the last. So why is it that you're hearing some of this for the first time? What is our culture like? One, those of us who do know are not going to get a welcome when we start explaining this to anybody else. The information is not welcome not because of any reason other than the fact that it's information, and most of us just don't want to hear it. Oh man, he preaching now. He come with that deep stuff. What did you expect? And besides, what the fuck is wrong with that? He gonna pick it apart and put it back together. Well, that's if you need it. Yeah. Do you need that? Because a lot of times, many of our people do need exactly that. Man, that stuff be boring. Yep, it's boring to you because you're an idiot. You like being an idiot. You think that's keeping it real. Well, keep this real. You're an idiot. And an intentional one at that. Otherwise, I would have called you that. Stupid as hell. And proud of it. Meanwhile, while we sitting up here talking trash about another group of people, was sometimes rightly deserved. The funny thing is, we also turn around and look at that same group of people amongst other groups of people and say, yeah, man, they got their stuff together, and acting like they got it together when they don't have it together. And really, we're making the same mistake they are. With one particular difference, though. There's one particular difference in this mistake that we're making, that they're making along with us. You know what that difference is? They can get away with it because they actually do have a nation. That they do have. In the end, a nation state does exist for them. I'm not upholding that. I'm not disparaging it either. It's just one of those things that happens. And you know, we got countries of our own that have the same resource, oil, in large amounts and quantities, but they were never going to be paid for the oil the same thing that folks here were going to be paid. And what's the reason? Well, that we don't know what that is. That's white supremacy. They were never going to be paid You can't take a country back in Africa and they have as much oil as here and they get paid the same. It'll never happen. They're too dark. That is one of the sad truths about white supremacy. But to get back to the main issue at hand here, if you know, the thing is that you take someone who applied the Malcolm X standard to his own education. Igor, for example, as I'm pointing to, he's not the only one in the world like this, but he's the one that I know of. And I want you to think about I want you to think about the Igors you know in your life. He's in a position to learn more at this point from the black manosphere than any FBA or ADOS brother that got their nose in the air when it comes to intellect. And you want to sit up here and talk about how the ones of you that use ADOS as a gangbang or as a set, you want to sit up and talk about, you want to talk bad about brothers from other countries. Well, you know, they ain't ADOS and they don't care about us and all. And then it's funny because then when someone looks at you and you can't write, can barely read with comprehension, and damn sure can't write correctly in English, your first language, then you want to sit up and say, oh, here you go with that Eurocentric stuff. No, nigga, you illiterate. That's what it is. You stupefied yourself. You decided, I'm going to be stupid. I'm going to be an idiot. I'm going to be dumb. And that's when they look and they say, oh my God, that's what the culture is. And you can't blame them. I know the culture's not that, but there are those of us ADOS and FBA who don't know that the culture is not one of academic ignorance. There are those of us that don't know that. Igor does, and others like him do. So what's going to happen? The black manosphere and its points are going to be taken by folks who actually use their intellect, linguistically and otherwise. And they're going to learn something while we stop learning from our own teachers. We're going down that path if we ain't careful. So we don't fully have that simp chip taken out of us. And part of the simp chip is that anti-intellectualism. Sisters don't have anti-intellectualism for themselves. You ever notice that? Go on, girl, get that degree. That's right, get that master's. Girl, look, you might be $800,000 in debt after that, but you gonna make $1 million. Go on, girl, go on. They don't have that for themselves and for each other. They just have it for us. Girl, that man got like 3 PhDs. He full of himself. He think he the thick. You ever notice that? So when we start to go along with the anti-intellectualism, are you really there for the bros, or are you there for the hyenas and the matriarchs? Because see, you will do exactly what they will do. They don't want a man. They don't really want that black man that's intellectual and learning and academic in any way. They don't really want that black man. But they'll use him. He's a mark. He's a lick. And you will turn around and take those same kinds of men and be like, man, but you know, look at you, man. Of course they're going to use you. Look at you. You all intellectual and yeah, they're going to use you. That's what they are. And you start to excuse them for doing it. That's idiocy. Idiocracy. We're not the only people in the world that have that, as I've stated. And as a matter of fact, I mean, that's a real big problem even in the States. That anti-intellectualism, it's there too. It's a major problem. It's bad in the States too. What do you think them hillbillies are? That's all them hillbillies are, really. They ain't nothing other than that. The hillbillies are just anti-intellectual, or the rednecks for that matter. They got that same problem, but they still want to call you stupid. I mean, they can't read. I've read the stuff that I remember this chick in Mississippi, some Facebook group, this broad in Mississippi wanted to be an author. And somebody said to her, you're not spelling the stuff right. That's not really what's important. You know what I mean? Okay, she a dumb bitch. Ain't no nice way to say that. Don't look at me like that. She a stupid bitch. She just white and from Mississippi, that's all. Nothing else. I mean, directions to her house include turn off the paved road and travel back 200 years in time. It's there amongst them too, but is it working for them? No. They can do exposés. The Republicans can do exposés on Republicans in Mississippi. Like, why are you voting for them when your life is like this? They're not going to come out here and help you. The Democrats would actually help you. If there's enough in the budget, they would actually help you. And what do they say? Well, you know, it could be like what they want. They're not intellectual. They're anti-intellectual. They don't pick this stuff apart. They vote against their own interests. Lyndon B. Johnson said that they would do it. Take the lowliest white man, just convince him he's better than a Negro, and he will vote for you. I didn't say that. Lyndon B. Johnson said it out of his own mouth. At least the meme says he said it. You see what I did there? I don't like really having to talk bad about people this way, but I'm watching how it is that black folk from other places, in general, they're willing to learn, and if not, you know what? They don't have contact with us, so they're not spreading this sort of foolishness amongst us in the anti-intellectualism. They're not doing that. It's not them. We don't have contact with them. Unless, of course, their first language is English and they're just as bad, just as illiterate in it as we are. And depending on the country, they may have an excuse. It really just depends on which nation and what the educational policy of that nation was. If they have a public school system, great. Then the excuse is gone. I guess if they don't have one, maybe they have an excuse because it may have been unaffordable. Probably was. But we're still shunning the Malcolm X standard to a certain extent. And one of the first things that we need to start doing when we start bringing in some folks, that's part of the reason why I say, you know what? Don't try to introduce the Pookies to this. That's why I say this. Don't try to tell the Pookies about this. One of the reasons I say what I say is that the best thing for us to do is to try to introduce not the Pookies to this, not the stereotypes. The best thing to do is to try to introduce those brothers that, frankly, sisters would call educated lame, according to Sergeant W. Pete's definition. Sergeant Willie Pete's definition. He coined the term educated lame, and he was talking about how sisters view black men with education and academic ability. And he was also referring to the lack of nuance that sisters had when they came, when they made this assessment. Even if they used their own terms, they made this assessment with no nuance at all. Now, understand, they want you to have nuance. These sisters want you to have nuance. You can't sit up and say all black women's are this, that, and the other. If you're right, you're not allowed to say it. But they want you to have nuance when it comes to them. And yet they also want you to accept them having no nuance when it comes to how they assess you. If you have a brain and you can use that in a formal academic setting, then you're lame. A real N-word would try to muscle his way through situations that don't rely on brute force. A real N-word will get out there and not only face danger, but he will face unnecessary risks that are guaranteed to end his life to prove that he's a real man to her. That's why you notice they can't respect black men that remain alive for a long time. Keep that in mind, y'all. So you have to go and look at the Malcolm X standard. You got to look at brothers who have the academic vigor, the intellectual vigor, even if it's not academic, at least the intellectual vigor to apply the Malcolm X standard. If you ain't going to sit in some white man's classroom, fine, but are you going to actually learn? Are you going to teach yourself? It's a valid question and it has to be asked. Will you? Because a lot won't. Many will refuse. Many will say absolutely not. No, I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to think. I'm not going to become literate in my own first language. I'm not going to do any of these things. You know what I meant. And don't question how I said it. Meanwhile, Igor Canga is explaining to us what's going on in his part of the continent, in his capital city, which will affect the rest of the country at some point, unchecked. He explains this to us, and we get valuable, beneficial knowledge about our homeland, to which many of us are looking to go as SYSBM or IBMOR passport bros, especially IBMOR, where Omar Ungawa Johnson is telling us to go. If you don't want no Western sisters, then go. Why not go to the continent, brother? I mean, that's okay as long as they're not on that BS. And you're going to tell African brothers that you're going to tell American sisters that them African brothers ain't going to tolerate what the brothers here tolerate. No. If you really on that square, you go and tell them African brothers to tolerate what we tolerate. You don't tell us to tolerate the BS off them sisters and then tell the sisters that the brothers from the continent ain't going to tolerate it. You don't do that. And frankly, they're already ahead of Ungawa Johnson when they accept that feminism and that misandry, because some of them already have elements of hybristomania. Some of them already got that. I know I've talked with Liberian women who have had their daughters and their nieces when shortly after they land here, and their daughters and their nieces hit puberty, then what do they want? The thugs. They told me about this. You done escaped from a country that got torn apart by thugs with guns, fighting over anything. It started over some political reasons, and it degenerated into just one group versus another. That's it. It degenerated. How do I know? Liberians and Sierra Leoneans told me that. That's what they said this. So what I'm talking about is what they said. And you got these women from Sierra Leone and Liberia that grew up in the States. And after their parents went through trouble to get their butts out of a country that was being torn apart by thugs with guns, automatic weapons, now they want the thug that tears apart the community into which they are born and being raised. Because if you're Sierra Leonean or Liberian, you're going to live amongst Black Americans. And I'm fine with that. I'm simply saying that they're going to watch two Black environments be torn apart and sexually reward the men that do it. Then turn around and reproductively and sexually boycott the men that don't, until it's time for those men to come and raise the children of the ones that did. Same thing as Akeisha, whose great grandmama was in the U.S. and born there and grew up there. Same thing. They become the hyenas. And we're getting this valuable information in more detail from someone like Igor Canga, and he's able to tell us this because he doesn't have to rely on Google Translate. That's what the Malcolm X standard does for you. If you don't learn it formally in a class, fine, but you still learn it. And if you think that, well, I'm just telling you to apply the Malcolm X standard for white convenience, okay then, learn an African language. Hurry up. Be quick about it. Use the Malcolm X standard there, teach yourself as much as you can, and go to those who know to teach you the rest, and try to actually learn it correctly so that you're not actually utilizing the language in a broken form. Because you will confuse people. Get started now. If I'm an elitist and I'm stuck up, then hurry up and get started in a completely Black context. Kiswahili, isiZulu, Sesotho, or Setswana. Hurry up. Lingala. Pick one, bruh. Get to it quickly. And if you got your fist in the air, Mr. Pro-Black, and you say you Muslim, and you might actually be, pick Fulani or Hausa. Go ahead. Especially if you say Arabic ain't Black enough, then pick Fulani or Hausa. Get to it. But that Malcolm X standard is what is necessary, and I'm seeing why right now. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a way Without that, there wouldn't be a way that we could share information across language barriers. Google Translate can't do everything. It's a lot, but it can't do everything. With that being said, I hope that this helps. Thank you for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, blackout. Assalamu alaikum in black. Heterosexual, non-select male power just because they don't like it in black. Patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. Thank you for flying again with us on Jet Black Airways, where jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. And when the plane docks at the gate, should you decide to press the Cash App button on the way out, only punch in numbers that are easy for you, nothing difficult. But right now, I would much rather and much prefer that you go to the links from the previous videos and get some of that merchandise. I've been asking, and I wanted to ask the designer if anybody got anything. And I'm not sure exactly where he is right now, but if anybody had bought anything, he would have said something to me. He's probably busy trying to work 2 and 3 jobs somewhere else instead of one, because not one has gotten his merchandise. So I prefer that right now. Right now, I prefer that. Please and thank you. Gender justice forever.